18-year-old Michelle Martinko was the all-American sweetheart, loved and adored by many. She was beautiful, smart, and full of life. People in the community knew her as she was likable and friendly to all. Around 4 a.m. on December 20, 1979, her body was found in her family's car in a Westdale Mall's parking lot, there in her hometown. Unfortunately, her murder remained unsolved for 39 years. This is the story of Michelle Martinko, the beautiful girl whose murder haunted the state of Iowa for many years. Michelle Marie Martinko was born on October 6, 1961 in Cedar Rapids, Iowa to Albert and Janet Martinko. She was the younger of two daughters and was considered a miracle baby because her mother had suffered multiple miscarriages before finally having her at age 44. When she was 12, Michelle was diagnosed with scoliosis, which is a curvature of the spine, and as a result, had to wear a brace that went from her neck down to her hips. Due to this, she understandably felt very different and self-conscious. She couldn't move around like other kids, which was tough for a child her age. Thankfully, she was able to shed the brace, and that was when everything changed for her. With her long blonde hair that she styled similar to Farrah Fawcett, she began to gain the attention of young men in the area. At 15, she caught the attention of 16-year-old playboy Andy Seidel, and the two soon began dating. To everyone around, they were a match made in heaven, both good-looking and madly in love with each other. Attending the Cedar Rapids Kennedy High School, Michelle was highly regarded by the school faculty. She was an average student and a performer. She performed in the school choirs and also theater productions. She was beautiful and stylish, which made some of the other students a bit jealous. When Michelle was 17, the pair broke up. Apparently, she wasn't ready for something serious and Andy wanted to fully commit to the relationship. This was when Andy started showing his true colors. He became stalkerish, wanting to know everything that was happening in Michelle's life. Who she was dating, why she was talking to that person, and things like that. On December 19, 1979, 6 days to Christmas, Michelle headed to the Westdale Mall in her hometown of Cedar Rapids, Iowa to pick up a coat her mother had put in layaway for her. It was supposed to be her Christmas gift and her mother decided she could go check it out before she paid for it. Michelle parked her car in a dark corner in the car park, but she thought nothing of it. After all, she was only going to be inside for a short while. While at the mall, she bumped into her ex-boyfriend Andy and the two exchanged pleasantries before going their separate ways. Her friend Tracy Price also ran into her that day. She noticed Michelle holding $186 in her hand and warned her to put it away. Michelle told her it was for the coat her mother had kept for her. The two then said their goodbyes after some small talk and went their separate ways. Michelle ultimately decided she no longer wanted the coat. Before heading home, she perused the stores in the mall. She also worked there part-time and knew some of the store attendants. She left the mall at around 9 p.m. and headed back to her car. She got into her car and turned the engine on to warm it up. Unfortunately, she didn't lock her doors when she got in. At that very moment, her door opened from the outside and she was forced into the passenger seat. She was brutally stabbed 29 times by her assailant and left for dead. No money was stolen and she wasn't SA'd. When 2 a.m. rolled by and she still wasn't back home, her father became worried and alerted the police. He began his search for his daughter as well as the police. At around 4 a.m., on December 20th, Michelle's body was found slumped over her passenger seat. She had been stabbed multiple times in her face, chest, and neck. Her family were devastated. Police were at a loss. Although her blood was everywhere, her attacker had gone through a great deal to conceal their identity, leaving no trace behind. It was determined that the attacker had worn gloves to ensure they didn't leave any fingerprints behind. Everyone was a suspect. But many in the town immediately suspected her ex-boyfriend Andy. At the funeral, he acted hysterical, almost getting into the coffin with Michelle. In the days that followed, police received over 200 calls and so-called leads, but that all led to a dead end. While collecting blood sample from her car, police found a blood splatter on the gear shift and sent it to the lab for testing. Although a prime suspect, police couldn't nab Andy for the murder as he had an alibi. His mother said he had been back home at the time when Michelle was killed. Also among the suspects was Michelle's current boyfriend, Mike Wyrick, who wasn't even in town at the time of her murder. Soon, police had gone through their entire list of suspects and still had nobody to blame, and the case gradually went cold. In 2005, Detective Doug Larison was in charge. Coincidentally, he had gone to high school with Michelle, and although they weren't close, her murder had deeply affected him. He felt a need to solve her case and finally put her to rest. According to him, it was the least he could do for his classmate. Thankfully, at that time, science had evolved and DNA had emerged as a forensic tool. While going through the case files, Detective Doug discovered that blood scrapings found on the gear shift had been sent to a lab, but no one followed up on it. He found the test results and discovered DNA had been found, and not just any DNA, but a male DNA. He then sent Michelle's dress, which had been safely stored in an evidence locker all these years, for DNA testing. On her dress, a full male DNA which matched the one found on the gear shift was found. This was the break the case needed. The DNA found was immediately sent to the Combined DNA Index System, the nationwide database of DNA collected from arrested offenders. But their hopes were immediately dashed when there was no match on the database, leading to another dead end. In the following years, detectives decided to go back to the drawing board. DNAs were collected from all the earlier suspects, including Andy, and there was still no match. This was good news to Andy and his family because for years, many in the hometown had believed he was Michelle's killer. But this was frustrating news to detectives and Michelle's sister. By this time, both her parents had died, never knowing who exactly took their daughter from them. Another 10 years passed and Detective Doug Larison decided to take the back seat and invite a pair of new eyes to look into the case. In 2015, Detective Matt Denlinger took over as lead detective in the case. He had been 5 years old when Michelle was murdered and had watched his own father struggle to solve her case. Desperate to solve the case, he reached out to Virginia's Parabon Nanolabs to help with phenotyping. They were able to make a picture of the potential suspect from the DNA sample. From this, they learned that the suspect was a white male, with blonde hair and blue eyes. Parabon was also able to find a person whose DNA appeared to be related to the DNA of the suspected killer by searching GEDmatch, a public national database of people who send in their own DNA voluntarily. That relative, Brandy Jennings, lived in Vancouver, Washington. Detectives then spent months after that, building a family tree. By October 2018, with the help of Parabon, the DNA match had been narrowed down to 3 brothers who lived in Iowa. Detectives collected DNA from the 3 brothers without their knowledge. Finally, detectives had their guy. Jerry Burns had been 25 years old at the time of Michelle's death. On December 19, 2018, 39 years after Michelle Martinko's murder, investigators went to Jerry's business in Manchester, Iowa, to interview him. He refused to voluntarily provide a sample of DNA, but was compelled to do so with a search warrant. The result confirmed what detectives already knew. Jerry Lee Burns was arrested exactly 39 years after Michelle's murder on the 19th of December 2018. His trial began on February 12, 2020. On February 24, 2020, after 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jerry Lynn Burns guilty of the first-degree murder of Michelle Martinko. On August 7, 2020, Jerry Burns was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In September 2020, he filed a notice of appeal to Iowa's Supreme Court to have his conviction overturned on the basis that detectives violated his constitutional rights by obtaining his DNA from an abandoned straw. His conviction was affirmed. He is currently serving his sentence at the Anamosa State Penitentiary. Michelle Martinko didn't get to do all those things she was looking forward to, including studying interior design at Iowa State University. Her life was unfortunately cut short. But she was very brave, fighting so hard, she was able to cause her assailant to cut himself, leaving his DNA behind, which undoubtedly led to his conviction over 40 years later. May her gentle soul continue to rest in peace.